Well, here we are, everybody. KSP2, this is the first video I've made. I kind of made a copy of one of my previous builds of a vertical takeoff and landing single stage to orbit vehicle. And lucky for us, Matt Lown and a few of his friends found an exploit where if you put a rapier engine on backwards and then put the nose cone and move it 2 clicks up and away from it, you get sort of an infinite fuel tank, and it's basically a single stage anywhere in the Kerbal solar system. So I went ahead and just made this ship because I've tried multiple times to get out to Laithe, which is one of my favorite places in the Kerbal solar system to go to, and you run into all kinds of Kraken issues because the game is just new and it's buggy. I think I've heard rumors that there's a lot of people that are pretty mad about it, but I'm not. I think that it was a good move on the developer's part to get something out there, sell a product so that they can bring in a little bit of capital and hire more programmers. I think the foundation of the programming is probably already complete, and now they just need some labor programmers to get in there and write the code to finish off the game. I think that this isn't a scam. There's no way it could be a scam because I think the developers know that as soon as they get colonies and multiplayer going in this game, that their client base is going to 10x. I mean, they're literally going to go from 4 million players to 40 million players, I think. So what did I end up doing is Googling how many people play KSP, and the answer was 4 million people worldwide. So then I figured, okay, let's do a conservative estimate. How many, or let's say 3 million people run out and buy KSP2. It's a long-awaited sequel, so I'm guessing it's probably more like 90%, but let's just go with 75. So they pull in about 150 million gross, and who knows what their taxes are and their tax breaks and how much they have to pay Steam to carry their program online. I have no idea what the details are, but $150 million is a lot of money. To me, it's enough to hire, 10 or 20 programmers at $80,000 to $100,000 a pop. Sorry, $80,000 to $100,000 a pop to get in there and start getting a lot of the heavy lifting done, which I think is a good deal. And so I have all faith that they're gonna get this done. So one of the first things I did is I made a little comm satellite that I can put in orbit around the Joule system, just because I didn't put any Kerbals in my ship, so I wanted a comms relay just in case. And I used the same method. I just put a fuel tank and a backwards rapier engine and a couple solar panels and a couple satellite relays. And then, so I'm going to fly that into a polar orbit there, a highly elliptical polar orbit, so it can serve as a good communications base. And so a lot of the functions of the game still aren't working very well. One of which is the maneuver node system. So I think I've been playing Kerbal so long that it's just easy for me to kind of wing it. And since this exploit that I'm using kind of gives you infinite fuel, I think, what is it at, 1,575 meters a second of delta V, and I think it was started at 1,600 something. I'm already getting ready to capture in a Joule orbit here. So, I mean, there's plenty of fuel to get wherever you need to go. You can check out all the different planets, and I wanted to see Laithe. I wanted to see what the terrain was like because they do have some good flat spots, so I'm thinking that there are some areas that it's going to be easier to build your colony on, and it probably won't be as glitchy and Kraken-like based on that. But one of the things I normally do when I fly into Laithe like this is I use the third planet out to give a gravity assist or gravity desist so that I can drop closer into Laithe and conserve a lot of fuel. However, once again, with this exploit, I didn't need to worry about it. One of the things I do like here, as you just notice, is that the inclination lines that are on your orbit give you a degree count to the 10th. So that makes it really easy to not use a maneuver node to square away your inclination so that you come into an equatorial orbit. quite easily. And then of course, like, I'm just not going to use the maneuver nodes. It's too much of a hassle, especially with the exploit. I think it messes with it too much. So one of the things I do like is where you enter and exit the sphere of influence, although they don't have the line there telling you how close you are going to be, so it's always a surprise. And for me right here, this was a lucky surprise. You'll see that it's just the sort of encounter you want. And so then I'm going to go ahead and circularize and deorbit on the daylight side of the planet and find a good place to set it down. I'm curious to see, once they do a bunch of patches and get things organized, if I'm going to be able to build that same vertical takeoff and lander that I have on one of my previous videos. That was a very fun ship to fly. In this case, I'm aiming for the far side of that middle big crater, assuming that it's going to be pretty flat terrain near the coastline there, so that I don't land and then lean over and on a 45-degree angle and possibly fall down. And they don't have air brakes yet, so I just had to kind of wing it. And I got lucky. I think I've landed on Laithe so many times that I know where to enter the atmosphere to end up where I need to go, or at least very close to the vicinity of where I need to go. Overall, it seems like very similar to KSP1 as far as the game mechanics on flight for airplane-like vehicles. I think the rockets are pretty similar too. I would like to see them improve the G-force meter on the upper right, so that it was more specific. You kind of use that in KSP1 as a marker for launching from Kerbin to kind of set my thrust kind of halfway between 1 and 2 Gs. That way, it seemed to follow the gravity turn just right so that you can get to orbit really efficiently. And as it stands right now, it doesn't really give you too much information other than the dial just moving back and forth. And so to make this exploit work with the Rapier engine, it has to be in closed cycle mode. I initially started it in open cycle mode and it didn't do anything, so you just keep it in closed cycle mode the whole time, and you'd think it would chew up all your fuel, but it's an exploit. So whenever they patch the game, they might fix that, which would limit where you can go in the solar system right now. So I might actually wait to patch my game and not automatically update it, because I don't want them to get rid of this exploit just yet. I want to kind of meander around the solar system and figure out, or get a good view of all the different planets and moons and see what's changed and what's not changed. I tried to put in a lot of reaction control wheels and tuck them up inside the crew cabin there, but I could only get about 5 in there, so I couldn't really pitch up as fast as I wanted to. So in the process of landing vertically, I gained a lot of altitude, but the exploit is making it very easy to not burn up all your fuel. I can probably set this thing to hover and then walk away and get a cup of coffee and watch a sitcom come back, and it would still have fuel. I also had to turn the thrust of the engine down to about 10%. Otherwise, it was way too powerful and it actually pulled the vehicle apart. And so here it looks like pretty easy terrain to navigate, although when they put in the resources for the colony mode, they might end up putting them in difficult places to either make you try to have to set up a colony close to them, which might be difficult on the side of a mountain, or set up some sort of infrastructure with rovers that would, set up a trucking system so you could, get it down to the refinery and get it ready for processing and pick up by a launch pad on flatter ground. Or maybe they're just going to make awesome launch pads that that you can set up on the side of a mountain, and that way you don't have to go descend so far into the atmosphere, and it'll save you a little delta V, that sort of thing. But I've tried to make landing pads to put on the moon in KSP1, and I I think in my Artemis, a brief look in the future video, just having one of my lunar landers land on it, the Kraken attacked and the entire ship exploded just because it landed on another built structure in the game. And so here I'm just kind of checking out the terrain, getting an idea of what Laithe's going to be like. I don't know how much work it is as a programmer to change the terrain, but it looks like there's a good amount of flat ground to set up on. If Laithe has modeled anything like Europa, what is it, Europa? I can't remember what planet has methane lakes. That'd be a pretty good resource planet to set up on. If that's how they're setting up Laithe, that'll be pretty cool for the game. And I really had to speed up the footage here because I found that if I was descending faster than 30 meters a second, I started to roll uncontrollably. Which actually happened in KSP1 as well, so it's not a new bug to this game, I should say. And now I'm going to head up into orbit and get a look at Joule. I tried twice. The first time I got into a very low circularized orbit, and I believe my velocity was about 6,000 meters per second, and I tried to dip in the atmosphere, and the ship, the moment it hit 200 kilometers, it just exploded. So then the second time I thought, well, let's just try to come to a stop before I enter. I've got all kinds of unlimited fuel here, so you can see I'm at 280 kilometers above the surface, and the atmosphere starts at 200. So I sped up footage significantly here to get me down close. But the idea was, there's a lot of gravity to Joule, so every time I got upwards of 500 meters a second, I wanted to slow down a little bit so that I wouldn't hit the atmosphere going so fast. So I entered the atmosphere going pretty slow, and you can see that it's pretty stable. I think I have the footage going at 10 times speed right now. The clouds look pretty cool. The terrain is really cool. I didn't expect there to be a solid surface underneath, but there is. And the atmosphere is so dense that I think I was going like 15 meters a second when I pitched up for landing. I wasn't able to pitch up at all once I got down to about this altitude anymore, even with power on. It's like the planet was sucking me in, and I couldn't get that prograde marker to get up above the horizon on the nav ball there. Every time I tried, I would just stall out and drop. And so I was like full power on in some of this area, but the atmosphere is so thick that it just wouldn't work. So eventually I gave up, and I was just about to assume that I would just kind of decay into the center of the planet. But suddenly, as I come out of these lower clouds here, you can see solid ground. So I thought, maybe I'll make a landing. And there you have it. My first video. Enjoy, everybody.